So where do you go from now? Where do we see Premila going to be in the next 3 to 5 years in this industry?
Yeah, so I think blended learning is here to stay. There'll be a lot of online learning platforms, digital learning tools. Also, the levels of skills that we expect from teachers and students will change. There'll be a lot of focus on STEM education, especially for the younger kids.
Is there a notion that people got focused more to studying during the pandemic?
We have only seen a growth in the last 2 years. Adult population was far more focused on doing an international qualification with the intention of probably migrating or finding some employment abroad. I have heard of some of these children who have just entered school and they've never set their foot in a school for more than 1 year. So I'm not sure whether they have got that holistic education. They may have studied their English, maths and whatnot, but not really the social skills. I don't think so.
Postgraduate students. So to start with, let me warmly welcome our guest who is on board today, and let me now invite Dr. Rohan Rattukorala to give the official invitation to the VIP and start off the session. Dr. Rohantha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kaushali, and it's actually an honor for me to introduce a very eminent person today in the field of education. It's a very respected personality who has over 20 years of experience in the education sector, of which 15 years working for the world's leading learning company, Pearson. In 2019, she was appointed the director for Pearson Lanka Support Services and a member of the senior leadership team of Pearson India. She has worked across professional, higher and academic education sectors, providing tailored teaching, learning solutions that champion learner needs and the outcomes they need to make progress in their lives. Currently, the Director, Employability and Qualifications, has focused on strategic market development in South Asia, in workforce skills, English language, learning and qualifications, and assessment in improving the efficacy of Pearson's learning solutions. Whether that means helping learners into employment, improving access to university, or helping learners gain recognition for their efforts across national boundaries. She holds an MBA from the Robert Gordon University of Scotland and a past graduate diploma from the Chartered Institute of Marketing, UK. She's qualified in organizational design for digital transformation from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, Premila Paulraj, Director Employability and Qualifications for South Asia of Pearson's, who will tell us on this final MBA diary for 2021, and it's a very, very opportune subject, Sri Lanka, Education Hub of South Asia. Premila, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rohantha. And ladies and gentlemen, I can't see most of you, but that's fine. So just to add to the introduction made by Rohantha, I would also like to speak a few words about Pearson as an organization. Pearson is the world's leading learning company. We are a British organization, but we have a very large presence in the US. Our CEO is based in the US, and we have offices in more than 85 countries. We have some of our largest businesses coming from US, India subcontinent as a whole, Australia, Brazil is another large market. In Europe, we are quite large, and China, which is an emerging market. So having been with Pearson for the last 16 years to be precise, I think I can only say I just live up to I try to live up to the motto of Pearson, which is always learning. So every single day in my journey in Pearson as well as outside of Pearson, it has been a journey full of learning. So I'm pleased to be representing Pearson as well as speaking to this audience about a subject that's very close to my heart, education, and whether Sri Lanka would be the next education hub in this region. I have a few slides that I'm going to present to you right now. Okay, can you see the slides?
Thanks, Premila. Can see.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I thought first and foremost, it will be good for us to have an understanding of the current education system in Sri Lanka. As you know, we have quite a simple structure in terms of the education system. We have schools, universities, and technical and vocational institutes. If you take the schools, kids start from pre-primary, excuse me, at the age of about 2. And then at the age of 5, the kids enter schools. And then they have the GCE ordinary level examinations, then progress to the GCE A levels. And we have a merit-based selection for universities, meaning one has to qualify through purely their academic performance to enter university. And then, of course, that's the academic pathway. Then, in addition, we have the technical and vocational institutes. Most of them are run by the government itself, the Tertiary and Vocational Education Council. So if you were to take the number of schools proper, we have approximately 10,500 schools run by the Ministry of Education. In terms of the private schools, including international schools, as well as the missionary-run private national schools, there are about approximately 150 private schools. Then we also have state-run universities. There are 15 state-run universities. And we also have the technical and vocational institutes run by the national level institutes, which are 4. We also have regional technical and vocational institutes amounting to 200 or over 200. So as much as most of us may not be aware of the kind of focus that the Sri Lankan education system has been having on the technical and vocational institutes, I think we are well spread across Sri Lanka with a large number of these technical and vocational institutes, and majority of them are state funded, meaning there's no fee living. So I think there are a large number of graduates or qualified personnel who are passing out of these technical and vocational institutes as well. Then if you take the universities, as well as the schools, we have the private and state-owned, which I had already spoken to you about. We have the state-owned schools as well as the private schools, fee-living schools. Likewise, in terms of universities, we have private and state-owned universities. So the 15 state-owned universities that I spoke to you about, as well as we have around 50 private universities. So when I say private universities, APIT is again one of those private universities. We also have the NSBM, the NIBMs, and all these other institutions that are offering foreign degrees. They are private, foreign, or it could be a local degree approved by the UGC, and those are the private universities. So again, if you were to classify the types of qualifications offered, we have the academic qualifications as well as skills-based. Academic qualifications, as you know, are offered by the universities, whereas the skills-based qualifications are offered by technical and vocational institutes. I'm going to touch on that a little later, a bit more in detail, as there are some qualifications which are skills based, but they are of a different level, not the level 2s and the level 3s, but I'm talking about the level 5 qualifications if you were to look at the skills framework. We also have among these schools and universities offering local and international qualifications. Local naturally are the GCE O-levels, the GCE A-levels, but internationally Pearson offers EdExcel qualifications, the international GCSEs, which are equal to the 10th grade or GCE O-levels, and we have the international A-levels equal to the local A-levels. In terms of the international degrees or higher education qualifications, there are a large number of foreign universities that have either franchised out certain branches to Sri Lanka, or you will also find some of them offering, like the Staffordshire University, in partnership with a local university who would offer their qualifications. And naturally, the medium of instruction, depending on whether it's a local state-owned qualification or whether it's an international qualification, it would, most of the local schools offer the local languages. So if I were to share some interesting facts and figures, these are quite recent figures. These are from the 2020 O-level examination, which I think happened sometime beginning of this year. We had 622,000 students who sat the local O-levels, of which 31% were private candidates. I thought that that particular figure of 31% private candidates, it's quite interesting. Where do these private candidates come from is a question that, you know, we all want to ask, because 622,000 itself is not a very large number, but of which 31% private candidates. And ironically, only 50% progress to the A-levels. So there are 50% students who don't qualify to progress to the next level of their education. So the next question we should be asking ourselves is, what happens to the rest of the 50% of the students? Can they all afford to do a foreign degree? Would they all want to do a technical and vocational qualification? Or would they join the workforce? If they join the workforce, then do they have the necessary skills and the training to perform the jobs? Then of those who progress to A-levels, again, these are very recent statistics, 300,000 plus students sat A-levels, and 194,000 qualified to enter university. That is a phenomenal 64% of the students who qualified to enter university. But unfortunately, I think we all know that the universities can cater to only about 30,000 students, 28,000 or 30,000 students in the local universities. So that's only about 15 to 18% of these students who actually qualify to enter universities. So we have a huge vacuum here. We have a huge gap here as to what happens to the 85% or 80% of the students who are really clever, who have a basic understanding of how the system works, and they have worked hard to get through to this particular stage in their life. But they are at crossroads as to what's going to be their next step in life, what sort of further education they may want to follow. So with that question, I'm just going to move on to the main theme of this presentation, which is the potential for Sri Lanka to become an education hub in South Asia. So if you were to look at this region, I mean, naturally Singapore and Malaysia don't belong to South Asia per se. But having said that, anyone in this region who's looking for international education would be looking at going to, I mean, those who can't afford to go to UK or USA or Australia, or who don't have the necessary qualifications to go there, may prefer Singapore or Malaysia. And you know, I mean, these are two economies that developed in the recent times. And there are a large number of multinational companies as well as top universities like Monash in Australia having set up their own university in Malaysia. Singapore has some fantastic global universities having their own branches. So with this, where is Sri Lanka placed in terms of countries like Singapore and Malaysia? So let's take a closer look at this South Asia region. My current responsibility for the last of the 16 years I have been with Pearson, at least about 12 years I have been managing this region, different countries at different times, but currently I manage basically across all the countries, including India. And my understanding is that Sri Lanka is seen as the most neutral country. Any nationality would feel comfortable traveling to Sri Lanka for education. They also find that cost of living as well as the course fees also tend to be quite cheaper. And recently in Pakistan, we did a very interesting research and found that the connectivity in terms of internet connectivity is the highest in Sri Lanka. If you were to compare, even India does not match up to the kind of connectivity that we have in Sri Lanka. So that again, I see as a positive sign towards Sri Lanka becoming an educational hub. We also have a large number of expat teachers. The recent addition to my portfolio is English language learning. And we have been looking for quality teachers who can actually, improve the, actually to teach the teachers or train the trainers so that we upskill the trainers. And since we have lost a couple of generations of teachers who have taught in English, we feel that we need to help these teachers to improve their teaching skills in English language. And while we were looking for these teachers, we found that there's a huge expat community who would like to come and spend about a year or 2 years in Sri Lanka. They would like to do Monday to Friday teaching, and then Saturdays and Sundays, they have a lot to explore because we are a nation with a rich past, a rich heritage, history, and certainly, a lot of these people would like to come and teach in Sri Lanka. So that's one of the plus signs that I see. So safety is another point that I would like to mention here. And I think also people value education because we have been taught from day one, your only way out is education. And irrespective of whichever the government that is in power, I think there has been a lot of focus on education, school improvement. And I think even in the last 2 years, which were considered fairly difficult years across the globe, Sri Lanka has done quite well in terms of, remote teaching. I know it was somewhat new to our teachers. Suddenly you are exposed to this area where traditionally teachers would come to school with their notes that they would dictate and either use a blackboard or a whiteboard, and then, teach the students in a classroom. But here they had to quickly get adapted to teaching through virtual media. They didn't have the blackboards that they were used to, and they had to learn various tools. So I think we have done pretty well in the last almost 2 years. So with all this, I think there is a lot of value attached to education in Sri Lanka. So that's another indicator why Sri Lanka should be becoming the next educational hub in South Asia. There's a lot of incentive for the investors to come and invest in facilities and tie up with the various local partners to offer their degrees or qualifications. So I think the government is also quite I would say they are pro foreign education, unlike certain other countries in the region, because having worked with countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, especially in India, their regulatory framework is so strong that they try to protect the local qualifications, and there's hardly room for foreign qualifications to thrive. Because the job opportunities are there only, even in the private sector. I think the preference is for those, IIT graduates qualified from the local universities. And those who do foreign qualifications expect to travel abroad at some point. But contrary to that, in Sri Lanka, most of the private sector prefer those who are qualified from foreign universities. So just to sum it up, I think there are a few gaps in our education system if we are to become the next educational hub in South Asia. One of the things I think we need to improve is the quality of teaching. Certainly, we need to move away from rote learning to more continuous learning and engaging the learners in the teaching process, more coursework-based learning, more research-based learning. I think those are some of those skills that we may have to improve in our teaching community. In terms of facilities, I think majority of the international universities are on par with most of the private universities, international universities, I would say. But I think it is the quality of teaching and creating that ecosystem for teaching and learning. And with that, and with the kind of support that we have, the government and the private sector, I think I would see Sri Lanka becoming the educational hub in South Asia in the next few years to come. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Premila. Very interesting. It's a different kind of a presentation which we had today. It's lovely speaking to you again. So there's a whole set of questions that has come in from different people, and let me pick up a few of them, Premila. The first question they're asking you is there a notion that people got focused more to studying during the pandemic? And what does your statistics say from your experience, Premila?
Well, to be very honest, I think where Pearson is concerned, we have only seen a growth in the last 2 years. So I would think that the adult population was far more focused on doing an international qualification with the intention of probably migrating or finding some employment abroad or even for further education. So most of them would do their undergraduate qualification locally, and then they may be looking at opportunities of going abroad to do their masters. So that's where the adult population is concerned. Whereas the kids, I think I have heard of certain, some of these children who have just entered school at the age of 5 for grade 1, and they've never set their foot in a school for more than 1 year. So they have been part of the school. So I'm not sure whether they have got that holistic education. They may have studied their English, maths, and whatnot, but not really the social skills. They may not have been engaged in sports. So they may have studied from the book, but whether they have got that holistic education, I don't think so.
So was there an increase during the pandemic, Premila?
Yes, at least where Pearson is concerned, I can say that there was an increase in the number of learners, number of students who wanted to do international qualifications.
Okay. So in your view, what do you think, what are the real chances of us actually becoming that educational hub? I mean, do you feel that there is some policy changes that is required? Do you feel that, it's just only a fallacy? How do you see it?
Well, I think we have been talking about Sri Lanka becoming an educational hub for the last, several years. And I know that compared to most of the other countries, the governments, the successive governments, I'm not particularly saying one government, but the successive governments have been quite forthcoming, and they have been inviting foreign investors to come and invest in Sri Lanka, start their own. I mean, look at NSBM. Of course, it's a local, it's a fully government owned university, the Green Campus. But it's a global university offering a number of international degrees. So I think that's a good starting point. And if we can have a few more of those facilities, but promote Sri Lanka as a destination, a safe destination for students to come and stay and study, which is also quite strategically located, I would say, for students from the Far East, students from within South Asia. And we are also seen as an unbiased country, having worked with a number of countries in the region. And one of the reasons I must also mention that, we are seen as a friendly nation, a welcoming nation, and therefore I think we have a very good opportunity to become the educational hub, provided that there are investors, foreign investors who can invest in international quality universities, facilities, and create that ecosystem.
What are the changes you see between Sri Lanka and other countries in the region? Could we have a view from you? Like, for instance, I remember, when I was based in Calcutta, when I was working for Ricketts, I was to operate from Calcutta. And I realized that in Calcutta, people are very interested about British education. But then when I came to Mumbai later on, Mumbai is totally American. They have a biasness towards American education. So likewise, what are the key trends you see from Pearson in the South Asian region?
So I think in terms of school education, we are a very British education system. We were formerly working very closely with University of London. That was before 1996. And so before that, we were known as London Examinations. And since 1996, when we became part of Pearson, we changed our name to Edexcel Qualifications. And instead of working with just one single university, we preferred working with a number of universities. We currently, I think we work with a number of global universities as well, just to ensure that our qualifications are on par with the expected level of knowledge that the kids today would need, irrespective of whatever the degree or whatever the country they plan on, doing their further education. So those are the global standards that we maintain. So we are very British in that sense, but with global content being covered. But in terms of, Pearson's education system itself, I would say that let me take an example. Now, sometime back when we were creating new textbooks for our qualifications. Now, in the past, our books were traditionally published and printed in the UK. But since most of our qualifications are now globally offered, we found that some of the content in our books were too British, that it wasn't quite aligned to the global standards that we wanted to maintain. So we had a team of examiners and authors traveling across the globe, meeting teachers, trying to find out what are those gaps they saw in the contents that were developed. So the books, the draft content was shared with the teachers. They went through, and then they made comments on the improvements that should be made on the content itself. So in Sri Lanka, one of the teachers who went through the biology book, she said, look, you're talking about an acorn tree in this biology book. And I have never seen an acorn tree because you don't find them in Sri Lanka. But could you instead have something like a palm tree? So our authors took that feedback quite constructively and they made those changes. So that's just one example, but different cultures have their different preferences, and we need to make our content and the syllabi cut across most of these cultures. And now that's not an easy task, but we try to stick to those global standards, but where required, we also customize our content to suit different cultures. So that's the extent to which Pearson would go to in order to ensure that it's a global qualification as well as something that meets the local requirements.
What do you see as, I mean, you're a respected person in this whole industry, and I mean, there's all sorts of stories saying that the Maldivians have gone back to out of Sri Lanka because of, one was the Easter attack, and then subsequently, of course, because of the foreign exchange currency issue. But then there are a lot of universities in the country which cater to the Maldivians. What's the reality, Premila?
So it is true that a number of Maldivians did go back to their country because they had some challenges in the last 2 years. But where Pearson is concerned, we offer the same qualifications even in the Maldives. So where it may have been a loss for some of the Sri Lankan centers, It wasn't quite a loss for Pearson because we had centers offering similar qualifications, similar Pearson qualifications in the Maldives. And the Ministry of Education in Maldives itself recognizes Pearson qualifications as their national curriculum. So we haven't lost out on the number of students, while Sri Lanka may have lost out on a number of students, but as Pearson, we haven't.
So, I mean, since you have almost 16 years working for Pearson, and there's so much of a following by education institutes and by students. What is your humble view towards a person who is looking at a career right now? Premila, I mean, it's easy for people to say, but the fact remains is that as we speak today, there's about 7,000 metric tons of milk powder that is required, and what's coming out, which has been approved by the government, is only just 2,000 metric tons because there's no foreign exchange. Then we have this whole area of sugar shortages. We have shortages in milk powder. I mean, you have the gas issue. I mean, you know what I'm saying? With all these issues, what is your advice to a youngster?
So, let me take an example. I think most of us, if not all of us, have heard of Winston Churchill. Churchill is considered as one of the best leaders from Britain. He was the prime minister and he was considered as the person who won the war. And there are a number of, quotes by Churchill that are quite popular, but one of the things that has stuck with me is where Churchill says, history is going to be kind to me, for I intend to write my own history. And I thought that's a wonderful statement. He's not going to allow anyone else to write his history. He's going to write his own story. So while the country is going through a lot of difficulties, and I must say across the globe, there are so many difficulties a lot of people are facing, but finding that opportunity during difficult times is something that you should be focusing on. I see a lot of positive things about the changes that COVID has brought about. For example, I was a person who always thought that I need to go to office, sit at my desk to do my work, and then I need to come home to play my role at home. But having worked from home for a number of times, there are periods that I went back to office, and then suddenly there was this lockdown and we had to come back and work from home. But the greatest lesson that I have learned is that you don't have to be at your so-called desk at office to perform. You can work from anywhere. Even customer facing is something that we do online now. Of course, there are times, we wish that we had the opportunity to go and meet the customers. But what I'm trying to say is that this whole, working from an office, going to school or going to university and, being in your classroom in order to learn, all that is changing. You can work from anywhere. You can learn from anywhere. I don't know how many of the students here today have logged in from their holidays. They may have gone out on holiday and they may have just logged in while being on holiday. So there are so many endless possibilities that have been created due to COVID. And I think if one is really willing to be creative, think out of the box and look at those opportunities, the new opportunities that these present circumstances have presented, then you are the person who's going to write your own history, not somebody else. It's not someone else who's going to tell you this is what you are going to do, but you know what your strengths are, you know what are the opportunities that are outside. You start writing your own history. So that would be my advice to a young MBA graduate.
Thanks, Premila. I think it's one of the best advice I have heard. A lot of people say there are different perspectives to this issue to a youngster, but I think that was really nice. And what made you get into this career, Premila? I remember teaching you CIM.
Yes.
I remember, but I remember how I've seen you in the papers, going in different places, and but what made you get into this career after your education?
Well, it was by chance that I became a teacher or an instructor, I would say. I did just like how most of the people started doing computer courses after their A-levels until they got their results, because it used to take about 5-6 months for A-level results to be out. I started doing a computer course, and where I did this course, they offered me an instructor position, which I happily took because I had nothing much to do. I was still waiting for, to find out what I was going to do. So I started liking teaching because I was able to relate to students. So I was teaching, and then I thought, okay, let me make it my career startup. I taught for about 4-5 years. And then at some point, I think I was good at it, but then at some point, I felt that something was missing in my life, that I needed to do something more. I felt that my style of teaching was more like repeating the same thing. Either I needed to change the way I was doing it, or I should get out and do something else. So it was then I had this opportunity again in education. An IBM business partner offered me a position to set up 5 training institutions across Sri Lanka to offer IBM certified courses, IT courses. So it was something completely new to me. That was the first time I think I started going through a contract, a contractual agreement. First time I started interviewing people. I was pretty young, but I was ready to learn. And I had I was fortunate to work with some senior people in that organization who would guide me. So that's how I got into it. But of course, in the meantime, I was studying, and I was doing CIM because my first qualifications are in IT. Then I kind of switched to CIM. And then, of course, went on to get my master's specializing in international business as well. So it was by chance. But then I'm so happy that I started with my teaching. So I understand from a teacher's perspective. I've also run institutions, so I know how to run an educational business. And now in this role as the head of a board, I know how a board functions, and I have been involved in developing new qualifications, marketing and sales. But currently my role is mostly to do with sales. I'm a through and through salesperson. What I would love to do is take over a new project, a new product, and develop marketing strategies, sales strategies, and grow the business. So, once it's in that growth phase, I like to always move on and start a different new product. And fortunately for me at Pearson, there have been so many new products introduced, be it in the K-12 space or higher education space or English language. So it has been very interesting for me over the last so many years because it has been on a roller coaster all the time.
So how do you see this foreign exchange issue, Premila? Because end of the day, people pay in rupees, and then the organizations have to pay in pounds. How does that work with y'all?
So it did impact in the initial stages because institutions had collected money from the students, but they had no way of paying us because of exchange controls. So there were delays in payments. And Pearson, as an organization, we realized that it was not a problem that the customer could have resolved by themselves. They had the intention to pay. So we were a bit relaxed in terms of making those collections. And we were okay by our customers paying in smaller amounts rather than those big bills, which the banks would not anyway process. So we are also working towards making those collections locally in local rupees so that exchange problem doesn't come to play going forward. So that's something that we are working on, and probably from first quarter of next year, we would have resolved that issue as well.
So how do you see next year panning? Because every industry, when you speak, they're saying it's going to be tough because one is that the skilled people are moving out, which is truth. I mean, the other day we went to one of these hotels for a meal, and then I realized that the quality of the staff has dropped, and I realized that, I mean, yes, there is a drain, especially in that particular categories to the Middle East. And second, of course, is that, you're going to have an issue with regard to the kinds of imports. So now in the education business, of course, there's no imports. It's only an export. But how do you see this?
Well, I am quite excited about, I mean, I have been speaking to my teams in different countries. I am quite excited about next year, not only for Sri Lanka, but across South Asia. I think across South Asia, all the economies have. Sri Lanka, I suppose, is the, badly affected compared to most of the other countries. But having said that, I'm excited for Pearson because Pearson has a range of products to suit different needs and different times. So while I'm not seeing any drop in the number of students who are sitting for our school qualifications or BTech high national diplomas, I see the Pearson test of English taking off. Already we have bookings up to May next year. So just to explain what Pearson test of English is, it is a competency level test to test the competency level in English language for students and people who are migrating. When they go to Australia, UK, Canada, USA, they need a certain score, more like IELTS. But where we differ is this test is 100% online, artificial intelligence based. So you book for a test, you go and sit in the computer for 2 hours, and then all 4 skills, that is listening, writing, reading, and the 4th skill, I forget, speaking. All 4 are tested by the computer itself through artificial intelligence. So our numbers are going crazy. We are just growing at a tangent. All the way up to May, we have bookings. So with this kind of multiple products to suit different times, different regions, different needs and wants, I think we are in a pretty good position. So I'm not seeing next year as a challenge at all. In fact, just waiting for next year to see how the numbers are growing.
See, I mean, I have worked across different industries, from tourism to the retail business, to fast-moving consumer goods kind of thing. But my pickup from the education industry is that this industry is very, very competitive. I mean, to the extent that education institutes are in cutthroat competition. I was just going through the advertising spend, Premila, on in this education business. 6 months it had already done 1.2 billion advertising spend, which is the one that has been picked up by Group M, which means that you're going to end the year up at about 2.5 billion. So if I say 2.5 billion, which is at 3 or 4% of revenue, which means that this market is worth about 80 billion. And I suppose the advertising that you see on the Sunday Times, in every single page is an indication of. But then, this aggressive competition, how do you see it in the education business?
So I think in any business, as business people, it's good to see competition, because end of the day, it's good for the customer. And Rohantha, you might remember the days when we were studying, we used to sit on those narrow benches, right? Now today, if I talk to my children, they would never want to go to a class where there are benches, because they would want, all those facilities, air conditioning, multimedia facilities, so on and so forth. So I think due to this so-called cutthroat competition, students have gained because the facilities have improved. But what we really need to pay attention to is the quality of education that is provided. Are we having shortcuts? Because a lot of these institutions may promise you can get your MBA in so many months, or your whatever qualification in a matter of few months, or just do a couple of presentations, and then you can get your qualification. So we need to, I think, pay attention to the quality factor to see if we are what is it that we are giving our students, because these are the people who are going to take over the future. So if you look at the people who are going to be managing big businesses in the next 10 years, are we giving them the right level of education so that they can take over the businesses that you and I are running and then take it to the next level? The expectation would be that they improve it by 10 times and take it to the next level. So is the education system, the qualifications, are they getting enough practicals? Because sometimes most of the learning happens in a classroom or in a virtual classroom, but are they having that exposure to the practical environment to really implement, learn through practice, like how Pearson BTech qualifications provide learning through practice? There are clear outcomes that everyone must, and you and I as marketers, I think, if you take marketing research, it's always good for a student to go out, do the research by themselves and learn, you see. So are we giving that kind of education to our children? And one of the other things that I would like to see, how the education system should be evolving. They can have competition, but are we really encouraging our students to do research?
Yeah.
Because we seem to be quite happy for them to learn from the book. And once you have taught what is in the syllabus, you are quite happy as a teacher. Okay, I've done my duty. I've taught them from chapter 1 to chapter 10, and now they are ready to do the exam. But what happens beyond that? Are they capable of doing research? Are they capable of innovating something? Are they capable of analyzing data? Are they capable of making a contribution, greater contribution to the next generation of learners? So that's where I would like to see the ecosystem, education ecosystem improving.
So where do you go from now? Where, where do we see Premila going to be in the next 3 to 5 years in this industry or in a new industry?
Yeah, so I think blended learning is here to stay. It's not that, someday if we declare the world free of COVID, that we are going to completely go back to what we were before 2020. So blended learning is here to stay. And there'll be a lot of online learning platforms, digital learning tools, also the levels of skills that we expect from teachers and students will change. There'll be a lot of focus on STEM education, especially for the younger kids, because again, their thinking needs to change. So if we eventually want them to have a research-based education at some point in their life, we need to give them the STEM education, a good grounding in STEM education at a very young age, which also includes artificial intelligence, cloud-based computing. I am intrigued by a new qualification that Pearson has introduced in esports.
Oh,
Right. So that's going to open up new jobs, completely a new industry. So I think we'll be looking at a lot of these new industries towards which we will need more qualified personnel. So more new qualifications, even degrees in esports that I think already we have a few universities offering degrees in esports, various, whether it's in developing a game, whether it is in organizing competitions, there's a load of opportunities available in these new fields.
there was a very interesting question that came. Let me see whether I can get that. Oh, here we go. It says, how important is primary preschool education, and is Pearson's into preschool education?
We are into preschool education as well. We have a lot of content that is developed. And again, as I said, it is STEM-based education. So from age 2, the assumption is that a child would enter preschool at the age of 2. From age 2, we have syllabuses and we have books. And we also have teacher training to train the teachers on how to teach the curriculum.
And that's also available in Sri Lanka?
It is available globally and it is available in Sri Lanka as well. It's fairly new. It's fairly new. It's only about an year old. We launched it during the pandemic. So we have, it's still at the growth phase.
So last night I was watching NDTV, and India is going through almost a third wave with Omicron. And in fact, I was planning to go to India on the 9th, but now they're saying 10 days of quarantine, so it doesn't make any sense. Well, what do you see? I mean, do you see, is it going to have an impact, and how do you read this?
It will have an impact in certain sectors in education. For example, in the month of May, I was talking to you about the Pearson test of English, which is the fastest growing English language test that we have within Pearson right now globally. And India was the fastest out of, all the countries. We recorded 0 entries in the month of May because the severe impact of COVID. The whole country went on a lockdown and we had to close all our testing centers. So we had just 0. And since I was responsible for that business, I mean, it was heartening to see by June, we suddenly increased to more than 8,500 entries. So there, and then we never looked back. Today we have, hundreds of thousands of entries, but we will have an impact, but I don't think that it's going to be long lasting. We might see a dip in the numbers for a couple of weeks, but then, as you know, people are wanting to get back to, as much as, there are so many restrictions, people are wanting to get back to their normal life. So there'll be ups and downs, but I think it's going to be we will bounce back.
So, final question, Premila. What is your advice to young Premila, who is 21 years old, maybe done CIM and just about to go to the business world? What is your advice?
I think one of the things I would like to do differently is, when I was young and just starting to enter the corporate world, people valued working in an organization for a very long time. They said you have to be there minimum 3 years. You don't want to keep changing. You don't want to keep experimenting, because on your CV, if they say that you have worked for 5 months here, 1 year there, if you have worked for a large number of companies, it's not going to look very good on your CV. I would like to change that. I think, rather than sticking to just one industry, I should have tried a number of different industries, so that my experience today would have been far more richer than just, being a specialist on education itself. So my advice for a 21-year-old Premila would be to try out different industries.
Thank you very much, Premila. It was lovely chatting with you and actually meeting you. I'd like to wish you all the very best for year 2022. And it's great, the kind of work which you have done. Actually, my cousin heads new product development based in the US. I mean, he keeps talking so much about Pearson's and how AI is coming into and the kinds of new products that are coming in. So I'd like to wish you all the very best, and thank you so much, Premila. Over to you, Kaushali.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Indeed, the quality of everything that we do is going to be the conversation in the next coming year. Thank you very much, Premila, for that insightful discussion. And as we always tell students, what we discussed today is not something that you can directly take from just another textbook. This is the knowledge of each and every expert who had been talking to us for over an year, every week. And I'm sure, just rather than having to go through your MBA or any other degree programs, this knowledge and expertise would add quite a lot more for your life. And we continue to do that, and we hope to do this in the coming year as well, as we mark the end of 2021. So thank you very much for your presence, and all the students and everyone in the audience. We will meet back again in 2022. Until then, do take care, and wish you all a very happy new year. Stay safe, and good night from Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.